We are here with all the usual suspects, the aesthetics of disaster, this idea of. I thought maybe today we would get into some interesting stuff, but before we get into that, let's just go ahead and go around the horn here. And Benjamin, Mr. Wizard, for those who may not know who you are, it's got to be everybody's got to know by now, but for someone random person coming in, would you be so kind as to share who you are and what you got going?
Yeah, benjamincgeorge.com is where you can find me. I get called Mr. Wizard as some of the nicer things, but up to a whole lot of good, hopefully, bringing good conversations and good content to the world and enjoying having good conversations with great people.
I agree. Paul, for those who may not know you, my friend, the Stig, what do you want to share with everybody, man? What do you got to tell people?
Yeah, not a heck of a lot. You can find me here on Sundays on the Psychedelic Roundtable with the fellas.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean that's about it. Like to participate in some more intellectual type discussions if I
Agreed.
can.
I don't know. You guys, this is what I was kind of thinking about, and I'm sure we're going to end up way in the weeds on something. But, I thought we would I had this idea the other day. I was reading this book, and it talked about how we seem to be in this transition right now. We're moving from like the idea of things into non things. And let me try to clarify what I mean by that. It seems like everything is, we're moving away from things that are tangible and everything's wrapped in information now. And people are spending so much time consuming information. It's almost like the Red Hot Chili Pepper song where it's like, you know, young kids getting high on information. And it's almost like information is a drug. Like everything's wrapped. And it just seems to me that we're losing the tangible for something that's intangible. And you can see it in relationships. You can see this transition happening. Is that kind of too broad? Or what do you think about that, Ben?
Well, I mean, things have definitely gone digital, and I guess there's something to be said about that. But I think there's a bit of a pushback too. I think there is kind of a resurgence, a renaissance of people trying to get things going back to nature. The psychedelic movement. A lot more of like natural medicines and things like that being at the forefront of conversations. Um, so I think while there's definitely a part of that, especially like if you kind of look at the world through like the TikTok world and things like that, I could see that, but I think it's just kind of a temporary thing as all of it's getting hashed out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been kind of a move with like younger people lately of like trying to become avatars,
Mhm.
and now maybe moving back towards like what Ben was saying. You know, moving back towards nature and the psychedelic movement. But it seemed like for a bit there, and it still may be going that way. It seems like people were getting all of their thrill seeking, their social interaction, and and existing, in a world that was virtual instead of the real world.
Well, I guess one example of that from the world is Facebook made this big old bet on the metaverse, which I knew was going to crash and burn at some point, but they just laid off 11,000 people, right? So you know, in laying off 11,000 people, I guess that's kind of a sign of how much of a wrong bet that was, and maybe an indication of directions things are going.
Yeah, I don't. It seems to me that the virtual is but a shadow of like the of reality. I was talking to a young woman yesterday, and what do you guys think? Do you think that I think virtual reality was an attempt to replace the spiritual reality? It's this idea of like, hey, look at this thing, and like people got really drawn into AI. People got really drawn into like our future as like this. You can go anywhere in the world. You're almost like a god. And in some ways, it seemed to me as if virtual reality was trying to claim spiritual reality because for so long there's been this spiritual void. And we talk about psychedelics, this renaissance of psychedelics. And I think that the psychedelic renaissance is bringing people back to the idea of a higher power that's not virtual, but it's somehow tangible, even though you can't really touch it. Like you can know it's there, and that's what virtual reality was trying to accomplish. What do you think about that, Jason?
I don't know that virtuality has had enough adoption to know really the direction that it's going to go yet. Like, I feel like I would say that it, I'd be curious to know, but I would bet it's probably somewhere between like 20 to 30% of the population has adopted VR in some way, shape, or form. Whether they've gotten an Oculus or they've like are gaming with it. And so I think it's an interesting promise, but it's not something that enough people I think have bought into. And I think it's going to be interesting to see that um like if the Neuralink stuff goes down, right? Like the idea of some of the stuff like Elon's talking about where you can like plug straight in to the system and be and that virtual reality will become instantaneous. Like everybody will tap in. But I think it remains like something on your goggles that you're wearing and whatnot. I don't. I think it's going to take a little bit before we really see adoption to then know really what its function is going to be in society.
I would say from a technical standpoint, we are very much incapable of mimicking reality. And it's come a long way. I mean, graphics are pretty wild these days in games, but it doesn't compare to walking through the forest. And
Yeah.
let alone, the fact that usually that's only engaging, a couple of the sensory inputs in the body. You're just seeing and hearing these things. You're not actually participating in them viscerally. You don't have the feedback. And there are things like they have these haptic feedback systems, omnidirectional treadmills, and all this stuff that are trying to kind of bridge that gap. But, I think from just a purely technical standpoint, we don't have the capacity to mimic the real world at any sort of level that is a big enough of a sell. Now, when you get into things like augmented reality, I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the next coming years. Where you all of a sudden you're walking down a street and it just looks like a normal street, and you put on your glasses, and the Chinese restaurant has a sign that says free pho today, and all of these other things. I think we'll see a bit more of that, but again, the adoption for it, just because of the technical resources that it requires, from a socioeconomic perspective, I don't see it really going full virtual anytime soon.
Interesting. What? No, I've been hearing about like smart dust. I don't know how much science fiction that is versus reality, but every now and then I'll read an article about this idea of nanobots or like this ability to pop up ads in front of you like in real time. Like how far fetched is that kind of stuff, Ben?
Well, it depends. So if I have a pair of augmented reality glasses, it's a lot more easy. But like nanotechnology and things like that are still way, way, way off. From a miniaturized perspective, we've built things pretty small, but the things that we can build very, very small are very, very basic. Um, you know, there's a lot of people working on this stuff, but I don't, it's one of those things. It's like VR. If you remember, there was a big VR thing in like the late 80s, early 90s, right? And everybody was like, oh yeah, VR is going to be the future of everything. And then the promise of it versus the reality just didn't pan out. And then it kind of disappeared. And 20 years later, now it's kind of coming back. And again, you had people like Facebook make a huge bet on it, and they haven't even been able to fulfill that promise by throwing billions of dollars at it.
Yeah. Does that? You think that has? When I think about nanotechnology, like what do you give any credence to like being able to have an RFID chip implanted maybe in your hand to like
Sure.
to for like an ID or a passport or something like that?
Yeah, and people have done it. So there's a whole kind of subculture of people who embed RFID chips, embed magnets in their fingers, and they're really big on like human augmentation type ideas. But those are still pretty fringe. And a lot of those things, when you start mixing biology and technology, there's a lot of hurdles that all of a sudden come into play. The body rejects those things readily. And to overcome that is one of the things that we really haven't done. There is work, and I've read some papers and seen some efforts that are kind of moving that along. Especially when you're talking like prosthetics and things like that, and then you have the stuff like the Neuralink. And so the idea is there, and people are working on it, but the getting it to the everyday individual is pretty far off, I think, yet. At least 5 to 7 years.
Yeah. Man, it's crazy. Jason, what do you think are some of the big issues we got coming up in the next maybe 5 or 10 years that could change the world we live in?
I think, well, honestly, I think the Neuralink stuff is really fascinating, and seeing like the effort that Elon's putting in, and just hearing him like when he was on Rogan, it was a while ago, but he was really kind of talking about these ideas of like when you can bypass the need for the screen and you can just directly interact, the way that information begins to flow and open up. And if that really could happen, that's going to be a significant shift to society, because the difference between the haves and the have nots, like, it's going to be, to have that kind of power and to have that kind of like understanding and information at your fingertips would be a complete game changer. And so again, I don't know how far off it is, if it's like 10 years out or longer, but that's one that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, my problem
It
with
makes me
that
wonder.
is everything can be hacked.
Right.
So all of a sudden you put a chip in your brain, and then you're like, oh cool, I have the power of Google at my fingertips, and then all of a sudden you're getting propaganda messages just directly downloaded to your sensory cortexes.
Yeah.
And some of which you could even be unaware of, right? Now he's claimed that they only have a one-way street for this, that you can't really have, you wouldn't be able to do this, but a lot of people have claimed that their systems are unhackable, and that have, felt the pain, the sting of reality.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's an interesting one. I can see it coming kind of out of nowhere.
Well, they've made a lot of progress.
In some ways.
Yeah. Sorry, George. Yeah.
That's all right.
Oh no.
I read it. Please.
I was going to say they've made a lot of progress, right? So they've actually, they had the chimp playing Pong with its mind. That was a very interesting video. And then they've actually started implanting it into like paraplegics and things like that, and allowing them to utilize, interfaces for the computer, move, like an electric wheelchair, some really interesting feats of technology when you think about what they're kind of doing. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with the whole process, but they've mapped like the firing of the sequence of neurons. Like when people look at an apple and they recognize it as an apple, they do this for hundreds of different test subjects, and then they get kind of like it's like plotting it on a graph, and all of a sudden you can see that the specific firing of these neurons correlates to an apple. And so now you can kind of project the idea of an apple into somebody's mind by having those neurons fire. So it's really fascinating stuff. And it's really cool because it kind of highlights how the brain works, and how we use information, how it's stored, how we recall it, how we interface with it. So I mean, it's fascinating technology. Again, it can always be hacked. And then my other really big concern with it is, who controls the switch, essentially, because it's only ever going to be as good as them.
It's true. How does this relate? Have you guys read any of these articles on like pre-crime? Like I read in Chicago,
Oh, yeah.
they have set up like this idea about pre-crime. How does reading these brainwaves, and how does the idea of what is this idea of pre-crime? Is that like your scrolling history combined with your credit history, or what? Does anybody know what that's about?
Yeah, so I looked into it when it came out. And what they were doing is they were basically taking like prior crime data, and then they were, correlating it with other data from social media and things like that. And they were able to predict, so they claimed, to a 90% accuracy of when a crime was going to happen. But it wasn't like the specific individual, it was like an area. So they would say that there's a 90% likelihood a crime's going to occur at, 6 in Wilshire type idea.
I'm always skeptical when I hear stuff like that, because, there's a lot, like, especially with numbers in tech, like they're really good at saying, look, we're 90% there, we're 95% there. But the difference between a chimpanzee and a human is like 0.02%. You know, they're like 99.8% the same. So when tech tells us, hey, we're 90% there, like that's a long way off, man. You're just saying that because it sounds good, but you know, what is 90%? Is that like the area where there might be a crime because banks get ripped off? So you're gonna say there's gonna be a crime at this bank? I mean,
Yeah, well, you know,
Or
90%.
like the weather,
Oh, go ahead, Paul.
kind of like the weather, right? So when you look at your
right.
app, your weather app on your phone, and it says like there's a 60% chance of rain. Well, they mean there's a 60% chance in the forecasted region, which could be this whole area where you
Right.
live, that rains is going to rain somewhere, not necessarily your place, but it's going to rain somewhere within the forecasted area.
Right. And so what they were using in that Chicago experiment was, you know, uh, like cell phone chatter, right? Like, and they were basically just spying on everybody. And then, you know, you would see, for instance, wherever there was going to be crimes, you would have, you know, just an excess of different types of messages with different types of words, because people, you know, typically aren't committing crimes, you know, in absentia or in a vacuum. There's a lot of correlation, and so they were taking the correlation and saying this is going to be, you know, it's the causation for this. Uh, there's huge problems with that, of course, from multiple different angles, let alone the privacy one. Uh, but yeah, from a tech standpoint, 90% there basically is, you know, you get a lot of things 90% there. The last 5 to 10% can take you sometimes twice as long as you got to the first 90. There's, you know, and it's 90% of it's there because all the functions, all of the, you know, all the data inputs, all the stuff is there, but actually putting it into a package and tying it with a bow is a much greater task than most people give credit for.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. I may have said this before, but I think there's like a parallel that says, you know, like tech never really shows up, man. It's always like 10 years away, or it's always 20 years away. Like we're supposed to have these driving cars all the time. We're supposed to have driving trucks. We're supposed to have automation. We're supposed to be like the Jetsons and live in the skypad apartments. And when I think about that, I always think of like, you know, people or investors or short-term investors that are sitting in a boardroom, and in comes this whiz kid and is like, look at this program I got. Look, it's gonna be amazing. All I need is $1 million. They give them the million, and then a year later, all I need is another million. You know, they just string them along, and it's like meta for Facebook. Like these things that are promised never show up, and it seems like we've bet the farm, and maybe that's one reason we're in this crisis right now, is because we've bet the farm for so many years on all this stuff, and it never shows up.
Well, it typically never shows up because you get down to these things called edge cases. It's like when you know, when the video of the Tesla not stopping for the little girl and just runs right through her, right? Well, that's an edge case. And now all of a sudden you have to take that edge case and you're trying to solve for this 0.001% of instances. But in order to do that, it requires sometimes a rewrite of you know, the entire logic of what you've built already. And that's why, you know, the last 5 and 10% of these projects take so much time, effort, money, and ultimately a lot of them fail. Is because they can't account for the edge cases. And when you have 8 billion people walking around on the planet, the edge cases are something that you have to consider, and they have to be dealt with. They have to be managed in some way.
It's, you know, it's like, what's insurance going to choose, like grandma or baby, right? Like if the car has to decide which one it's going to hit, how do you insure that? How do you take care of the car making a decision who lives and dies? You know, they can't figure that out yet, you know. So I don't, like, that to me feels like that edge case of like, how do you solve for that? And maybe you don't, and then therefore the tech's probably there. It's just, can we get it adopted in these ways that they want to bring it out to the masses?
Right. And it's not just necessarily those. Sometimes it ends up as technical edge cases too. Like all of a sudden, well, on the winter solstice, the light is a certain way in this region of the world, and that just sends all of our sensors haywire because of, you know, they're using LiDAR and all of these things to accomplish these feats. Well, now you have to figure out, now you have to program an entire astrological projection into your system so it knows when there's going to be a winter solstice. So now you can solve for the winter solstice. Oh, guess what? Summer solstice is an entirely different problem. It's actually not similar whatsoever. Now we have to go off and solve for this. And this is, these are those edge cases. But when to Jason's point, when you get to that real world scenario, how do you handle these? What sort of trade-offs are you comfortable with? What sort of risk are you willing to accept with these things? And from a public perspective, the public really doesn't enjoy more risk being put on them at any given level, let alone an insurance company.
I wonder how much do you think like industrial espionage plays, like giant conglomerates, like I really don't want this technology out here. Let me just throw a wrench in this project.
Probably a lot.
Probably quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, most of your corporate espionage is stealing IP and then trying to copy and recreate it, which creates a whole different set of problems because, you're copying something incomplete and then trying to roll it out. And unless you have some, gifted team of engineers who have solutions ready to go, which you probably don't because you're copying shit in the first place, you just end up in a bad scenario.
Yeah, it's digitization is definitely something on the horizon that's worth spending some time on. Paul, when you lay awake at night, when you lay awake at night, what is it that's on your mind that makes you do that?
That makes me stay awake.
Yeah. Do you have anything that's bothering you about the future that you got on your radar?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're like currently we're going through we're seeing a pretty big cultural and political divide in the country. Um, I think poverty is rising. Um, the gap between the wealthy and the poor continues to rise. And I kind of think that we're heading towards, we're as a nation, we're becoming more and more desperate, and that's really concerning for me.
Do you see it? Like, do you see? There's a lot of talk about no one really accepting the results of the next presidential election. Is that something you think is possible?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, the guy just announced he's going to run for president again. He still hasn't accepted the results from the last time he ran for president.
Well, I think by saying that I'm going to run for president again kind of implies that you have to accept those previous results, right?
Yeah, I mean, you would think, but I don't know. It doesn't seem to be the case. It's like I'm willing to jump back in and participate in this system that I know is rigged, that I have no chance in. Like, they got a word for that, right?
A few.
But that's the same thing Hillary did. It's the same thing he did, and it like is that going to escalate to the point where something actually happens? Because it seems that there's been more and more people on both sides that don't accept the idea that they lost. And it kind of fits the corporate idea of never admit guilt. Never admit you lost. Like it seems to be more like I don't think it's a blue thing or a red thing as much as it is a strategic thing. And I'm curious if what's the next step in that strategy? Is the next step in that strategy to tell your people like, okay, this time we really didn't lose. This time's enough. Or is this more like rhetoric that is just going to be more of the same?
I think by and large, it's rhetoric to line their pockets. I look at how much money these people make by just being in the public eye, and I think a lot of it's profit driven or monetary drivers, but at the same time, how does that correlate to the common individual who's now playing a part of the system, has joined a tribe and says and feels they've been cheated? You can only have people feel they've been cheated for so long before you start to have incidents, before you start to have people who just say, you know what, well, screw it, I'm just going to go grab a gun and I'm going to go shoot.
I think we're already seeing that,
and we are. I agree. Yeah,
but I mean, it's not like the rhetoric so much doesn't bother me. It's the fact that there are a lot of Americans out there that believe that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's the part that bothers me. which goes back to the American sixth grade education stuff,
Right. Yeah, and
right?
so it's a systemic problem.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. And so I mean, that's the kind of stuff. Look, I'm a I'm a firm believer in equality, and not forced equality, but that things are if I'm accessing my government, that my government is blind to my race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, all of that stuff. And so we're really seeing people like really try to push those boundaries of fairness, of equality, and that stuff bothers me.
Let me ask you this, and just to make interesting conversation, like, you know, like maybe we should define equality, because there's no such thing as equality. Like, none of us are born the same. Some of us are born tall and good looking and fast, and other of us are born short, wear glasses, and are clever, but like, there's no equality. Like, if you're a different race, you're not going to get treated the same as everybody else. If you're slow, you're not going to get treated the same way as everybody else. So when we think about equality, we should know that that's like a noble lie. I think we can agree that we should be expected to at least have some sort of base level of treatment. And I think you could look at that as equality. Can anybody else help flesh out a better argument of
I think
equality?
I think the goal should be equality of opportunity.
I like that.
Um, equality, is a misnomer, like you just said. But equality of opportunity is a potentially achievable feat for a society. Now, the way our society is structured, fat chance, right? You get elected to Congress, you're not representing your people, you're representing, the people who funded you to get there, and all of the, people who are trying to get certain laws passed for their own benefit and their own, bottom lines. But if we had a focus of equality of opportunity where, you remove the barriers of entry into these things, and you have, and you could, people will say, well, anybody can start a business, but that's not true, right? What sort of resources does it require? What sort of, human skill does it require? What sort of all of these things, and where does that come from? Well, you have to have the education, you have to have the, the community, you have to have all of these things that are structured in a certain way in order to enable that. And in the West, we just, we don't have that.
Yeah, the reason I bring up equality that's a beautifully put, and I want to even add another layer on there. It seems to me like the word equality has been weaponized, especially
Sure.
for people below a certain economic threshold. And it's like, this white person is not equal to this black person. This black person is not equal to this Jewish person. This Jewish person is not equal to this. It's like everybody below this economic threshold, you guys fight about this inequality bullshit, okay? That way you're not talking about us. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, like, these guys are on a whole nother level. And the stuff they throw out to the people is like red meat. You guys just fight over this stupid stuff. And and it's not equal. It's not fair. But they know the people on the bottom are going to fight about that. And I think that when we talk about a sixth grade education, when we talk about being educated in your government, I think that this is something people should be thoroughly getting to understand, is that we no longer live in the United States of America that you were taught. I don't care if you were taught about it in Arkansas or taught about it in California, taught about it in Florida or taught about it in Idaho. We do not live in the United States of America that you were taught in a history book. We live in a multinational corporation that doesn't really care about you or your family or your tax money. Like, you have the illusion of where your money goes. I recently listened to this girl, Catherine Austin Fitts, and she was the former secretary of HUD for housing. And she said when she was in the administration, she had figured out a way to give the taxpayer like a financial statement at the end of the year. As a taxpayer, you would get a financial statement the same way you did if you bought stocks in a company, that would say where your tax money went. But beyond that, it would say where your money in the local community went to. It would break it down for you. Your money went to this school, it went to these roads. And she was ran out of town.
Of
I said,
course.
dude, what are you doing? You can't do that.
Yeah, of course.
Right. But yeah.
Yeah, nobody wants to know that their money went to a bomb that killed a whole bunch of civilians in Yemen. Because at the end of the day, they would say, I don't want to support this at all. And then all of that big funding from the military industrial complex dries up and goes away and can't get slurped up by all of these people who are quote unquote at the upper echelons of society.
So,
Right.
I mean, how much do you think? So, the IRS ramped up their agents, right? They hired like something,
Yeah.
like tens
15,000.
of agents, right? How much of do you think that is them preparing for people to unplug and just be like, I'm done paying my taxes? Like, it's not supporting anything. I'm done supporting this industrial complex. And people like, do you think they're preparing for a wave of society to be like, I'm done?
I think they're preparing to go and get more. Like they're going to take more. Like they
Okay.
didn't hire these people for I think it was Zsa Zsa Gabor who said poor taxes are for poor people. And it's true. If you make a certain amount of money, you don't pay taxes. Like that's ridiculous. But if you make under probably a few $1,000,000, they're coming for you. Like I've been audited twice. Like I'm a truck driver. I wrote a letter to when this whole COVID thing went down. I wrote a letter to my senator, and 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the IRS. Like, hey, look at that! Congratulations.
Yep. You got yourself put on a list. Yep.
Yeah, guaranteed. And it wasn't even a mean letter. It was the letter had to do with COVID, and what I said is like, I think that we are spitting in the face of the Nuremberg Code here. And it was when they were trying to tell me like, hey, you have to get a shot if you want to go to your work. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. That's ridiculous. That's violates all my freedoms. So I just sent a letter to my senator, and then I got that back. Like I don't believe in coincidences.
Oh, no.
And these 15,000 IRS agents are coming for the people that have any kind of money, because that's how bad the government wants it.
It's 87,000, wasn't it?
87.
Yeah.
You're right.
And not only that, the job posting was you have to be okay using deadly force. Right, that was part of their job posting for hiring these new agents. Which, wow. Talk about a throwback to the tax collector, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You could see it everywhere. Like they were supposed to like give back money to the kids who got loans. Like I think when Biden came out, they were going to do away with some student loans. They're not going to do that anymore. Like I think what you're going to see, and this is I kind of want to circle into this too. Like in the next 10 years, like I see this hard turn to the right. And what I'm basing that on is if you look at like the new people on the fringes that are being pushed into the limelight, like if you watch the Tim Pool show, like those kids are taking a pretty hard right. If you look at like this Tate character, that guy's taking a pretty hard right. Elon Musk taking a pretty hard right. And if you look, if history as a barometer, we can see that after a swing to the left, you see a swing to the right. And I'm worried that there's going to be a big sort of roundup of people. You're going to see homeless people round up, put away. You're going to see some of the people on the liberal left that seem to be out there taken away and put away. I see that coming. And do you guys think that that's too far of a reach, or any ideas?
That's a bit too far.
Is it? Why?
Well, I mean, we have guardrails in this country. We're a country that's under the rule of law, and the things that you're describing would be like circumventing those guardrails and our constitutional rights and the rule of law. We don't live in a country where you just can round up people that have a different political view than you. That's not going to happen.
We don't yet, but if you remember when Biden first took office, his first speech was the greatest threat to this that's facing this country is domestic terrorism. So now by labeling somebody as a domestic terrorist, which George probably got put on a list like that, all of a sudden now you can remove their rights from them because you simply classified them as this thing. And so I think we're going to see more of that. I don't think it's going to be as overt as what you're saying, George. I think it's going to be much more subtle. For instance, where is it? I think it was Canada just legalized euthanization of mentally ill people. I think you're going to see policies like that, and you're going to see, well, if you do get labeled in one of these buckets, like a domestic terrorist or something like that, they'll have things like, you know, oh, we can forcefully sterilize you. You know, you're gonna have measures like that, and they will dehumanize you first by labeling you and putting you in a bucket, and thereby removing your rights. And then, you know, they're allowed to do whatever they want at that point.
I think we're already at the point of show
That's
trials.
far.
I'm sorry, Paul. Go ahead.
No, no, that's all. I mean, that's a real stretch.
No, but it's already happening.
I mean, well, like it's already happening. People are getting their rights removed and then euthanized.
Well, not euthanized, but there are people like Canada just made it law that they are allowed to euthanize mentally ill people. That's
okay, but we're talking about the United States, right?
Right, but
well, how about January 6th? Like, there's plenty of people that were held in solitary confinement and haven't even been charged yet.
yeah. So you know, I don't think these things are going to be grandly overt, but all of a sudden, you know, it becomes, if you create the precedent for this, then it becomes easier to just take that next incremental step for these things. So, you know, all of a sudden, you know, when did you first hear the term domestic terrorist? Right?
Right after the, yeah.
It hasn't, it's relatively recent, but yet all of a sudden it's the greatest threat to this country.
Well, I mean, it's been in the last 20 years.
Which is
domestic terror.
Right, but I would say that that's relatively recent, right? You know, and
I would say it was after we came back from Iraq. That's all of a sudden domestic terrorists. Domestic terrorists have gone from being people that bombed buildings to soldiers that came back from Iraq that are upset. I think that those are like the biggest threat, and those are the people that are being labeled as domestic terrorists. Not because that they want to ruin our government or they want to kill people, because they're upset that they were lied to about all the wars that they fought.
Well, I mean, like my recollection of domestic terrorism goes back to like the Ku Klux Klan and you know the skinheads, where the government was coming out and saying we have a war on terrorism, like George Bush, and then you know then there's a whole bunch of people out there going, yeah, well, if we're gonna have a war on terrorism, we have terrorism right here in America. They're called the Ku Klux Klan. They're called the skinheads or the white Aryan resistance.
right,
You know, the white nationalism.
right. But then, you know, all of a sudden, you know, look at the labels that are getting slapped on people these days. You know, in all it takes to be labeled is to have some wrong speech out in the public sphere, or you know, one bad tweet, for instance. I mean, you know, so all of a sudden, you know, it's these incremental steps, and you'll see they'll be overstep occasionally, and then they'll roll it back and say, oh, we're sorry. But then fast forward 2, 3, 5 years, the same thing's happening, but there's no blowback. You know, it just becomes this kind of incremental encroachment on people's rights and liberty. And I don't think you could argue that we've seen that grow tremendously ever since 2001.
Well, I think one interesting one that recently happened over the last, year and a half or so was with all the protests, a lot of local legislation, state legislation started pushing laws against protest. And it was seen as this like, oh, great, yeah, we're protecting us. These are good things. We don't want to let the bad guys protest any longer. So, these are good laws. These are going to protect everyone until the next round of protests need to happen. And you're like, oh, I can't protest. Right? Like they've removed that right in a lot of ways. And it'll be really interesting to see if there's something that does come back, where we start seeing some protests come back around, and what kind of force is going to be met there because of legislation that got passed right under people's noses.
Yeah, you know, an interesting one is I remember in the 90s, everybody was like, privacy, privacy, privacy. The government can't look at any of my stuff, blah, 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 blah. And everybody was gung-ho about that, and there would be no chance for that to ever come to fruition. Fast forward to an Edward Snowden, where he leaks that the government, not only are they spying on everything you're doing, but they're creating profiles about you. You know, and they're doing all of these things, and it was basically just kind of like a fart in the wind. You know, everybody just kind of went like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's happening. And so they completely got away with violation of constitutional rights. and nothing was done about it. In fact, they've ramped up those programs.
Well, so I mean, the right to privacy is not a constitutional right.
True. Right. You're correct. Right.
Well, I'm just
I'm thinking about
like,
it.
oh no, there's no right to privacy.
Well, some
Right,
like
I mean-
your HIPAA rights, like your medical information, right? Like that's yours, and like that's not to be shared. There's no illegal search and seizure, so that's kind of a right to privacy,
Right.
unless they have a warrant. So like they're like the
That's-
things that are in your possession are things that are that they're. I mean, I don't know how to define the word secret or privacy, but the things in your home are private property, and private property is protected.
And then
Yeah, but there's no right to privacy though, right? I think the closest the Constitution comes is
Private property.
is quartering soldiers in private and I think that's the closest thing. But
my mind's tickling. I think there is something, and I just can't recall it right now. And it's been a long time since I reviewed my Constitution, unfortunately.
well, it's definitely not an enumerated right.
No, it's not an enumerated right, but it's one of those things I think that the Supreme Court ruled, was kind of an extension of one of those things. I can't recall it off the top of my head.
I just
I think
did
that-
a search. The right to privacy is not mentioned in the Constitution, but the Supreme Court has said that several of the amendments create this right.
That's what I was.
Okay, so we're talking about unenumerated rights, right?
But does
Yes.
so? But how does that lessen the argument to you?
Well, it sounds like what Jason just read that it's not clear. In fact, it sounds pretty vague. But that even more so after what Jason read, that there's, it is not written in the Constitution, and it, it sounds like it is suggested that some of the amendments do provide privacy protections, which could probably be argued.
But I think going into your computer and stuff is a violation of like it's a violation. They need a search warrant for that, and like that was the problem
Probable
with
cause, right.
this
Yeah.
probable cause. Like they're not allowed to just come in your house and search your stuff. They're not allowed to just do that. Like they need probable cause, and these programs allowed them to go into your hardware and go into all your files and view it whenever they wanted to. Like that's why they call it Windows, because there's a window into your computer and they can see it at all times.
Well, I think
No, but
I think like so if you're accessing the internet, right, then you're in public space.
Well,
I think like Facebook and social media, they're allowed to take your pictures and stuff like that. But the files that you keep on your computer that you don't put in the cloud, that are strictly on your computer, those are your files. And if someone looks at them, that is a
it falls under private
against the law.
property.
The internet and access to it is a public space.
It's not entirely though. Like for instance, I have private servers. They're connected to the internet, but it's still a private server. It's and I think it was ruled by the Supreme Court that those are basically an extension of private property rights.
Okay, so I mean, if we view the internet like your server is like a home,
Mm-hmm.
and then I leave my house and I jump on the road, which is the World Wide Web, to travel to your house. Like at some place, I'm crossing public space.
Right, but then all of the actions you take at my house should not be privy to those prying eyes, and that's not the case.
Well, then if I get that information in a private space, and then I use public space to bring it back to my house, well then
You're still robbing someone's house. You can get on the freeway, but if you go into someone's house and take their stuff, you're still robbing them.
So if I go, these are arguments that are being
Totally.
made in courtrooms across America right now, right?
Yeah,
What is public, what is private, what is internet? I mean, that's part of the problem that we have is that, and maybe by on purpose, that these things haven't been clearly defined. But I know that's there are groups working on trying to clearly define, like when I go online, when is it do I leave my private platform, which is my computer, my laptop, my phone, and then I go and I'm using public space to access information, bring it back to me, and then if I'm doing that to in correlation with committing a crime, like where does that where are those lines draw? When was I thinking about it to actually using the internet to do it?
I see where your point is, but I think this is where they kind of ruled the internet is kind of like a public utility, and that came with the whole Section 230 that regulated the social media stuff. And it's been years since I've looked at this, but it was the same idea of like if I use electricity in my house, and all of a sudden I'm using more electricity, you can't take that as probable cause that I'm doing something illegal like growing cannabis in my house and use that to come raid my house.
No, I know they're not going to actually write that down, as a reason to raid your home. But if they see that happening because they're viewing it, they're seeing like every one of his neighbors is $200 a month. He's paying $1,400,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they're not going to actually use that, and they're not going to write that down. But they'll begin right there to begin their building their case that you're actually growing cannabis inside the house.
Right, and then I think a few of those cases have been judged, and it was where was your chain of custody of the evidence that started this whole thing, right? And I think if all of a sudden it was, oh yeah, we looked at the electricity records and we saw this $1,400 bill opposed to these $200, so we started an investigation. I'm pretty sure most of those have been thrown out of court, to my knowledge. Now, I'm not robust in this knowledge, so I could certainly be wrong. But I think I think there's, and again, this comes down to, how we operate as a society. But the question is, do you think that should be allowed, that we should be able to slurp up every single person's data without any sort of probable cause, create records and files of people, use programs to monitor these things and, pull out anomalies? Is that something that a government agency that, doesn't necessarily have any sort of civilian oversight should be allowed to do?
I mean, are they collecting this data and they're actually, are they naming you as the person connected with this data that they're collecting?
Oh yeah, there's a file on every one of us.
Well, what do you mean, like an FBI file?
Oh, NSA file, but yeah.
An NSA file?
Yeah. That's what Edward Snowden kind of blew the cover of, is there's basically a file for every American out there, and they're putting every single piece of data about you in that file. And then, they're using AI, essentially, more like machine learning, to pull out anomalies and, do all sorts of nefarious things with that. Not just look for crimes, but identify people who would be good snitches, coerce and blackmail people, a lot of different nefarious activities as well. So, the question is again, should a government agency with no civilian oversight have that capability?
Well, maybe I'll play devil's advocate here, but Edward Snowden says...
No. It wasn't what he said. It's the data that he leaked.
Oh, the data that he leaked.
Yeah, he leaked all of, he basically copied the NSA servers. These are the programs that they're using. This is the data that it collects. And, it was a very robust program. And then not only that, but these are the tools that we can use to, hack into your password protected phone, your private servers, all of basically anything that was digitized.
So it sounds like, at some levels we need to have the privacy laws either more clearly defined or new ones introduced that protect privacy.
I would agree with that. And I think it also comes down to, how people should be governed, or if people should be governed is probably the better question. But, how people should be governed is the question that we have the closest connection to. And, for me personally, I can understand the impetus from the government perspective of wanting to do this, right? You're wanting to maintain your power structure, you're wanting to maintain law and order, you're wanting to maintain, you know, this society that, is created. However, there's so many, you know, there's so many bad things that are happening with these funds. Same reason that woman got ran out of town for showing where all of your tax dollars were going at the end of the day. Because people don't want it. They don't want you to see where it's going, because then if you saw where it was going, there's no chance that those people would still be in power. So if those are the people who are using this information for not just personal gain, but, corporate gain and, the erosion of rights and privacy, where does that line get drawn? What should we do as a public society? What should be the solution?
Well, I think that this is the solution. I think that this is everything that we have discussed so far is part of the whole. Like the current war we're in, the idea that we all have a file, the idea that there's this scarcity, there's this idea of scarcity. Like the truth is, at least I shouldn't say the truth because I don't really know what the truth is. However, in my opinion, what we are going through right now is financial collapse, and you're seeing you're seeing the circles get smaller and smaller and smaller. Like this idea of COVID coming through and having the entire transfer of wealth from every small business owner. Like, how come all the small businesses get closed down? Costco's wide open. This is called property consolidation. This is called capital consolidation. Like what you're seeing happen in our country is the exact same thing happened in the Soviet Union. Like we are slowly but surely being changed, and that's what I mean by this is not like Paul. This is my challenge to you. We don't live under the Constitution. The Constitution is a piece of paper, and those rights don't apply to you. They don't apply to me. They don't apply to Ben or Jason. Like posse comitatus has been suspended. You can be taken out with a drone. Like there's different levels of justice. Just look at the people that don't ever go to jail. How much more does our system look like the Chinese system than the American system? How much are we fighting on the bottom? Like we are being put into a new container as we speak, and not enough people know about it. Like we think we're protected by the Constitution. We're not. We don't have elections. We have selections. Like none of us get to choose the person that runs. We talked about this in a previous podcast. Like you have to have $10 million in order to do that. You can put your name on the ballot and say you're going to run for it, but you don't have any money. You're not going to make it there. And if you even got close, people would shut you out. Like we don't live in the United States anymore. We live in a corporate structure, and we are employees of this place. They take our taxes the same way a corporation takes the taxes out of your check first. Like you don't even get your money anymore. And I think we're going to see the collapse of the pension funds coming. Like that's the next shoe to drop, in my opinion. Right? Like look at what's happening. Look at the way they are setting up euthanasia for old people. Like they don't have old people's pensions, man. There's no money in Wall Street. It's all digital. Money's been shipped out. We've bought millions of schools in Afghanistan. It's gone to non-government organizations. And when you think about the United States talking about infrastructure, they're not talking about our country. When they talk about infrastructure building, they're talking about building pipelines in Ukraine. We're spending $15 billion a month. That's infrastructure, but not for us. But it's infrastructure spending. So you get like a little bit of the picture when they say things. But if you just pan back, the first step is like, dude, none of this makes any sense. None of it makes any sense. But when you start panning back and you look at the globe and you go like, well, there's a lot of money over there. Hey, weren't they going to set aside money for infrastructure? Well, shit, that looks like infrastructure, but it's not over here. And you look at the sixth grade education, that's by design. They don't want people smart enough to come in here and know where to vote, how to vote. They want us fighting on the bottom, hating each other. Hey, I saw a good picture of like there's a black guy and a white guy and then a banker. And the banker has this big giant pile of cookies. And the white guy has one cookie and the black guy has no cookie. And then the banker says to the black guy, hey, that white guy stole your cookie. You know what I mean? Like the people on top are siphoning all the money. What do you think about like look at Paul Pelosi and Nancy Pelosi? Like she just quit. Do you think that's a coincidence that somebody broke in their house and did something with the husband? Like that's connected. This is connected. We don't see what's happening, but I can tell you there's major changes happening in our country and not enough people are talking about it.
Sounds really wacky. That's why.
Yeah, but it's
The truth is always wacky.
yeah, but the thing is there's evidence to support this.
Mhm.
That's and so yeah, it sounds
What kind of evidence are we talking about?
well. We've already cited quite a bit of it, but when you
I mean, no, I'm like the evidence, like because something happened to Paul Pelosi. Is that evidence?
no
Like,
no
like
that's
anecdotal cartoon.
And
yeah, but it's
all the government people going in, coming out multimillionaires. They make $100,000 a year, but they all come out multimillionaires. Those people are getting paid. They take money from lobbyists.
right.
Nancy Pelosi is the best trader in American history, Paul. How do you think that happened? Do you think she's better than like Elon Musk or any of these corporate funds? Like, she a better trader than all of them? She's insider trading all day long and it's not illegal. They all do it. Not just using her, but all of them do it. They know what bill's going to happen before it gets passed, and they go put $1 million on it. They put $500,000 on it. And if it's like that is happening all day long. Those people aren't even writing the bills. Our congressmen and senators aren't even writing the bills. A lobbyist comes in, hands them the bill, says, "This is what you're voting for." Okay. Why do you think there's a revolving door between all the lobbyists and the politicians? You can see it in Hawaii, man.
Right.
Like, I see people that work in high industries here, and then all of a sudden they go to a lobbyist because they know all the rules. They just go in and they switch it. Like, it's what's happening here is happening here. That's the evidence.
And it's even more than that. We have the evidence of people like what Trump's son got $2 billion from the Saudis. You got Hunter Biden, who got millions of dollars from the Boriska thing in Ukraine, right? You got, and so these are proven things. There's evidence that clearly say this has happened, and so these people are selling out everybody to line their pockets, and this is kind of
That's stretch right there, man.
Say what?
I mean, really, it's like, so. I mean, Hunter Biden, he can't be employed.
He can't. He should not be taking money from foreign governments and giving it back to people in his family. Or there should be a conflict of interest at the very least.
It wasn't.
He's doing that. He's taking money from foreign governments and giving it back to his family. Is that what he's doing?
Foreign government energy companies.
Yeah.
Foreign government energy companies. Yes.
Foreign government energy companies.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Burisma.
So he can't work for foreign government energy companies.
Well, so if you look at that whole thing, what happened is Joe Biden went over there, and this is all documented. He celebrated giving them a quid pro quo if you have to get rid of the lawyer who's investigating this company for fraud and all these other things that they were committing, or else. And he's the vice president of the United States at this point. And the or else was, we're gonna cause you all sorts of problems. And it was a quid pro quo. All of a sudden, that the lawyer and the whole investigation gets shut down. Hunter Biden gets put on the board of an energy company because he's really qualified. And this is the same thing that happens on the Trump side and all these other fuckers. But this is documented evidence, man.
I'm gonna have to research this. I want to see what this documented evidence is.
Please do.
So it doesn't need to be. The best way, if you want to see what's really happening, is look at the corruption that happens in every other country, and that's the corruption that's happening in our country. The same thing that happens in China happens here. The same thing that happens in Saudi Arabia, it happens here. Like, that is the government. Is like these people that are running the government. Like, it's not Congress. It's not the Senate. It's a group of interlocking boards of directors, sovereign
people.
wealth funds. It's a bunch of unelected officials that are running the show. And that, when you look at it from that angle, things begin to line up. All of a sudden, the puzzle starts to fit together, and you're like, oh, that kind of makes sense,
And this isn't like new hat either. The aristocracy has done this from as long as you want to go back in history. It's why the Romans had bread and circus, was to distract the people from all of the fleecing that they were doing. And to keep the power structure as the power structure. And this is, where the saying, power corrupts, ultimate power corrupts, absolutely. Once you have these power structures in place, they naturally become corrupted because the ideals that board them are no longer carried by all of the people who work in that environment. They get bought and paid for. All because now, look, as a big energy company, I'm a big oil company and I don't, and I need this contract to get through. I'm not going to go off and, get myself elected to try to get this to pass. I'm just going to go buy these people and pay enough money to these lobbyists to get this passed through. I'll send donations to, 70 different people who are running in Congress. And then when time comes to vote, guess how those people are going to vote? They're going to vote for the people who line their pocketbook.
I mean, I'm not denying that there isn't corruption out there. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that. There for sure is corruption. But like George is painting a pretty like doomsday picture here about the level of corruption.
It's coming,
buddy.
Because you can tell one or two stories about corruption doesn't mean the whole system is corrupt.
Yeah, but then you can take those stories, and if you keep looking for more stories, you find more stories, and then you can listen to the people who have gone through these like the woman who got walked out because she had came up with the idea to show everybody where their tax money went. There's these little pieces of the puzzle that, yeah, in a vacuum, in isolation, yeah, it kind of, it's just a one-off thing. But the more you look at this, the more you will find that these are not just one-off things, and this is much more systemic than it is not.
It's, to me, like it's hard. It's hard to look at it because once you start looking at it, you can't deny it. And then you have to start changing the way you see the world. Like, like there's a guy in Hawaii that stole $200 billion, not $200 million. And I'm like, it blows my mind like that. Like I see that guy all the time and I'm like, how did this guy steal $200 million from the state of Hawaii? He stole 200 million. And part of the penalty was they made him give back 150. And that begs the question, where's the other 50? What happened to that? You give back 150? What else happened? And this guy's on house arrest? Like, wait a minute. Wait. There's a guy's on the corner that's selling crack and they go to jail, but this guy steals 200 million and he gets house arrest. He's got a fleet of cars. Like that is corruption at the highest level. And that's just a symptom of the sickness that plagues us. That's on a local level. What's happening at a federal level? How many people are downstream from this $100 million contract? And how many of these people are each taking a cut? And what happens when one guy's like, I'm just gonna take my cut over here? And once the stream stops, people start fighting. And I think that is part and parcel of what's happening with the economy. As the economy dries up, as more companies fail, people get reckless. People start getting nervous. People start selling each other out. They start turning on themselves.
Look at FTX. Look at how all that went out. And now they're pulling the strings on where the money went. And follow the money. What, 50 some $1 million went to get people from the Democratic Party elected. You look at the guy who his mother raised over 150 some $1 million for I forget exactly what it is off the top of my head. But now they're pulling back the cover of this. He comes out and he says, "Oh, we got hacked for some $450 million of your customer money, of your money that you invested in our company, not even invested, that you were storing with our company." And it turns out it wasn't a hack at all. He was paying off the Bohemian government because he made a deal with them. And so, the layers of this are deep, but once you start pulling on the threads of this, the evidence begins to line up in such a way where, now it becomes such a preponderance of evidence that you have to, as a reasonable individual, ask yourself, where does this stop and where does it begin? And, I think to George's point, as you continue to span out and you look at this from a 10,000 foot perspective, that evidence stacks up very, very tall.
On one point on FTX as well, before FTX failed, Voyager failed. And Voyager was one of these companies that was giving people like 9, 10, 12%. It ended up being a full Ponzi scheme. Voyager went to its customers and said, look, we made some bad loans. We're going to get bought by new owners. Everyone's going to get 70% of their money back. You know who bought Voyager? FTX. So like those are connected. Like it's big bank take little bank all day long. And the guy on the bottom gets nothing. And this is exactly what I mean. When you look at that particular scam that happened, like let's use FTX as the model. That is the same model that's being used everywhere. And we, American people, people with Social Security, people with pension, the pension funds have been leveraged. The pension funds have nothing, they're completely wiped out. And when people figure this out, you know, that's why there's this mad scramble for a CDCB, or what, a central bank,
Digital currency.
CBDC, because we're getting to a point where they can't paper over the losses fast enough. And you could argue that this FTX was a money grab. Do we need this over here? Sorry, we need this over here. We got to cover this hole so we can cover that hole. But there's not, like, how many more giant scores are they where they can go and steal stuff? Like, we've already been doing it in other countries, right? When the US goes there, we take all their resources and put it in a slush fund, and then we can pay the debts for a while. Now what? Okay, now where are we gonna go? Ukraine, let's get their stuff. Okay, FTX, let's get their stuff. But now where? Like, and as we're stealing as much money to rob Peter to pay Paul, the baby boomers are getting older and older and older, and there's not enough money to pay them. That's why we have zombie corporations. That's why everyone's freaking out about the Fed raising rates. Like, dude, these zombie corporations are going to fail. You keep raising these things. What's a zombie corporation? A zombie corporation is a corporation that makes $0, but just buys its own stock back. They borrow money from the Fed, they park it at the Fed bank, make interest, and then pay their bills with it. Like, they're insolvent. They're insoluble.
They're insolvent.
They're insolvent.
Yeah.
They're insolvent, and a lot of them are insolvent. Banks, insurance companies. You know, all of a sudden, all these. Why do you think you can't talk about COVID deaths? Like, insurance companies don't have money to pay that out. Like, they have to paper over all this. Like, it's coming down, and people, they're not even worth. Like, that's why there's so many distractions. That's why they want us fighting, is because it's getting to the point where they can't hide stuff. So when you can't hide stuff, what do? You make the people below you not pay attention. Hey, you want Trump or you want Hillary, man? Oh, yeah, no, Trump is a bad man. No, Hillary's this. Who cares about either of them? They're both garbage. They're both dummies. Not one of them cares about you at all. At all. At all. Not at all, man. The government's coming down. People don't get it, man. Right? Look at show trials. Like, I'll throw this one out here because this will make you have a good laugh about it. How much is the Alex Jones a show trial? That guy's supposed to pay like $1 billion.
Oh, no.
1.2
trillion. Right? I think it got to. Yeah.
That's called a show trial, man. They had him in the Soviet Union, and now they're here. Like, that guy can't pay $1 trillion. But you know what it does? It gets people talking about it. Yeah, Alex Jones is the bad guy. Donald Trump's the bad guy. No, the Democrats are the bad guys. There's people down here butting heads. But guess what? It doesn't matter if the blue guy takes a dump on you or the red guy takes a dump on you, because that's what's coming. And you could be left holding the bag, all of us. Like, we should take our government back. That's what people are worried about. And that's why people hate nationalism. Nationalism is a way for the people of the country to get the spoils that belong to that country. And what happens when the spoils of the country go to that country? Well, the oligarchs don't get the money. You kick those guys out. That's what Putin did in the Soviet Union. So everybody hates that guy. He didn't let the oligarchs take everything. And that's what China's doing. China put Jack Ma in prison. Hey, sorry, Jack, you're getting a little too big for your bootstraps, son. You think you run stuff? We're the government. We run stuff. We're the gangsters, not you. In America, the billionaires are the gangsters. The government's nothing.
Well, if you replace all your United States of America with the state of California, it's the same argument people were making about California in the 70s, and yet there it stands, still functioning as a state.
Yeah.
I don't know what that argument was. The argument.
I'm not familiar with that one either.
What?
What happened in the 70s?
Going downhill. Like this system is crashing. Well, George just made an argument that sounds like the same argument that people were making about the state of California in the 70s. Like, California is going broke. California can't support itself. All the wealthy people are sucking out in California. The politicians are running California into the ground. All of these different things they've been saying about California for 50 years. And there it still stands. There's California. You can get on a plane, go fly to it. They got working infrastructure, highways, everything, that people thought was going to go straight into the toilet. More companies have been moving there since they were talking about the demise of California in the 70s than at any other point, since then, at any other point in California's history. So that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's a pretty bleak type of outlook you got there, George, but there's definitely a lot of, like, And I'm not saying there isn't anything to what you're saying, but what I'm saying is it's not as bad as you're trying to make it out to be.
Unfortunately, I think it's worse. Just
What do you
from
why is it worse, Ben?
I mean,
well,
we
so
can still have a conversation in 20 years, and people are still going to be saying, "Oh, the United States of America is going broke.
so
All of the wealthy people are sucking out all the wealth right out of the country." You know what I mean? It's like it's going to be this. It's the same shit, man.
right, and I'm sure all the
it's entertaining. That was entertaining, George. That for sure.
Thank you.
well,
Thank
you know, and I'm sure the people in the Soviet Union said the same thing before the Soviet Union became insolvent. The reason that it hasn't happened so far in the United States is mainly tied to the petrodollar, and you know, the ability for us to just endlessly print money and go into trillions and trillions of dollars in debt and kick the can down the road. You know, eventually the rooster comes home to roost.
What do you think? They're going to switch the currency that back the petrodollar?
They already are.
Like the ruble?
So
like the ruble?
yeah, so have you heard of BRICS?
Yeah.
So what's happening right now is, for, you know, since World War II, the United States has essentially had a stranglehold on the global oil economy. Now, with BRICS, it's a new alignment of people. You have Brazil, you have Russia, you have China, you have Iran, you have, and you know, you could say, oh, those are the other guys on the other side of the coin, but yet now they're attracting a lot of countries that are kind of in the middle, who are saying, hey, guess what? We're not going to pay $1 for our oil. We're going to pay 50 cents on the dollar for our oil because we can get it cheaper from these guys. And the only response to that, you know, and this is the response that's happening right now, is that, oh, well, we're going to sanction you. We're going to put embargoes on your country from the United States and whatnot. But we've had a shift in the manufacturing center of the world since World War II as well. Now it's throughout Asia, Southeast Asia, and so that alliance has been gaining a lot of steam because now these people have the ability to, you know, actually depeg the petrodollar. So all of a sudden that the $30+ trillion of debt now has to be accounted for, and it can't just be promised off through future liability. And so, and you know, all of a sudden we went to having you know, Maduro, the head of Venezuela, as one of the FBI's most wanted people, to sending diplomats down there to start to shake his hand because of Venezuelan oil reserves, and we don't want them to join BRICS. You know, Saudi Arabia just turned tail, who's been one of the people who basically have, you know, kept the petrodollar for the past 20-30 years in business. They're talking about joining BRICS. So when you depeg that petrodollar, it's going to cause a massive economic shift in the world. And all of that debt and all of the liabilities that have been accumulated since World War II, at least, are gonna come home, and you're gonna and you know, it's going to make this country insolvent.
You know, I heard another angle on it too that said, you know, with the United States being the current the reserve dollar, half of our government uses the petrodollar as a weapon for the IMF to, you give out loans and you put sanctions on people. Like, we use the dollar as a weapon against like Iran and other countries, but the rest of the world needs that dollar to trade. So when you're using, it's like a split personality. You're using the currency as a weapon to punish people. But here's this other country over here. It's like, dude, we just want to buy fish, man. Like, why are you guys jumping up this rate over here on these people? Like, we need to buy fish. And so it's causing like a pretty big divide in that. Like, when you are the world reserve currency, you should be like the oil that you know, that greases up the levers of the machine to get stuff running. But when you're using it as a wrench to beat somebody, it's kind of like saying, hey, like, if you think about the money as a tool, it's like Ben's like, hey, I'm using this wrench to pound this guy in the face. And I'm like, well, I needed to fix this thing over here, man. And you're like, too bad, I'm pounding this guy in the face with it. Like, it's the same tool, but you're using it for two different purposes. And when one person is using it one way, the other people can't use it at all. And like, that's just a problem from being too big. Another interesting point that I heard was this girl used this thing called the popsicle index. And I never heard this in my life before, but she was saying when she was younger, you know, the majority of the country, she called it the popsicle index, the majority of kids could run to the local store, grab some popsicle sticks, and come home. And she said when she was younger, the Dow was at like 1,000. She says it. She goes, so I say the popsicle index was at 1,000, and so was the Dow. The Dow's gone up, 100 or 30-fold since then. But in today's world, almost no kids can run to the store and get a popsicle and be safe. And so the lobbyists come and they find ways to raise up the Dow, but they don't ever lobby the government to make the community better. So the popsicle index is a index that measures the health of actual communities. Yeah, and it's inverse. So the more the wealth goes up, the more the Dow goes up, the worse the communities get. And like we have seen this explosive growth. And in doing so, it's like Jenga. You got to pull from the bottom to put on the top. And when you're doing that, you're pulling out the very foundation that makes the country good. Maybe in the like, I would argue that California, been a pretty big exodus. At least, like I know that my family's probably sold 15 different houses in the last 2 years. The majority of my family has left there. If you look at, I think Elon Musk left there. I think Rogan left there. I think taxes are through the roof there. I think that, you have a lot of crime there. And I think it's kind of connected. I know I'm somewhat of a conspiracy. I should put on my tinfoil hat.
Well,
but I see the homeless people. Yeah.
Everything's interconnected. Go ahead.
Agreed. Yeah. So I think that, when you see like the prime real estate, like San Francisco, like there's just a flood of homeless people in there. Well, why not flood all the homeless people in there? And then when it gets so bad, what happens to the price per square footage? It comes down. And I think that you can see what's happening in the United States, especially New York and California. This is the new model. This is the Chinese model being moved into our country. And the same way they have city states in China. Now, I might butcher this, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me in China, the person ruling over the city state has autonomy to do whatever they want. They have their own police force, they have their own rules, and the people there abide by that particular governor is like the president. And whoever does good in those city states, then they get to move up in the party and they could potentially rule one day. I think what you're seeing with Gavin Newsom in California is like a little dictator. Like that guy can do whatever he wants. It's his state. And the reason you have COVID and these things is they get to keep these emergency powers. And when you have emergency powers, the Congress can't do anything because you have emergency powers. You are effectively, it's the same way a president has wartime powers. The Congress is almost neutered. The same thing in a state. The same thing that we had in Hawaii when the governor Ige has state powers. That's the law of the land. And there's always a pandemic. There's always a crisis. There's always a war. And when that happens, you're allowed to maintain those powers. That's what's happening in California and New York. And I think that you're going to see these places like San Francisco that are prime real estate. You're seeing the price be driven down so developers can go in there and buy it up. Like private companies have already bought up the infrastructure in California. If you look at the electric there, like they're running all of that, and they do a horrible job. Private companies, I think Ben made a point. He said, in order for communities to run effective, there's some things that should never be privatized.
Well, right. And there's I had another point that was in my mind. I just lost it. Damn it. Paul, I sincerely hope you are correct and George and I are off our fucking rocker. I really do.
Well, I'm not saying like you guys are like I'm not discounting everything you're saying. I believe there is some truth to what George is saying. I just don't have that same apocalyptic view that he does.
It took me a while to get here.
Yeah, it took me a while to get here too.
It took a lot of massaging, George. I believe it.
Yeah.
Like to defy logic like that, it takes time.
See, but that's
to bury your head in the sand. Either way.
Yeah, see, but it's not a defying of logic if you're following the chain of evidence, and that's the problem. But
it's anecdotal evidence.
It's not though. This is not anecdotal whatsoever. This isn't what something that's happened to me. These are things that are articulated and documented, man.
Yeah, I can show you like the Anglo-American establishment. Like there's tons of books that tell you exactly what's happening. There's the smartest guys in the room, Enron. Like there's tons of books that tell you, like you want to read the Financial Times. Like they don't lie about it. They tell you, we as this company are coming in, we're going to take we're going to privatize everything. Here's what's coming. Read the World Economic Forum reports. Like they're telling you, this is the plan. Here's what we're doing. Like no one's hiding it. But the fact that it gets written off as like, you're crazy if you think that. Okay, well, call me crazy, but I see it happening. And like, once you begin seeing it happen, Like you can't to deny the evidence is what's crazy. You know, you can say it's crazy, but once you start looking at the evidence, like you can't deny it, man. It's coming, and and people would rather fight about silly things than just to take some time and read some books or listen to Catherine Austin
Like,
Fitz. She's the she used to
like,
run HUD.
so what? Like, is you're talking about your interpretation of the World Economic Report?
I'm talking
What
about
they actually say on stage.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Well,
I
I mean,
mean,
yeah, what they actually say on stage, but
Not my
it's
interpretation. What they say, their words, not mine.
okay.
yeah, I mean, have you
So,
watched the
so
speeches
what
from the World Economic Forum?
I have. So, George, what are they saying that concerns you?
Well, what I see is the one that I think is going to be the nail in the coffin is the the digital currency. And let me paint you a picture of what I see. You know, this I'll go full conspiracy on you right here. Okay,
Yeah, so this is
COVID.
an interpretation right here. So, like, I mean, you're playing armchair economist, right?
No, okay. What do you want me to tell you? You want me to tell you what bothers me? Because I have to tell you my interpretation of what bothers
Yeah.
me.
So let's hear it.
Okay, so the why do I start off with this? Why would a government want to change to a digital currency? That's the first question I ask myself. Like, why would they want to do that? Well, it seems to me the legitimate answer is, well, the one they have right now doesn't work. And then you look for evidence. Okay, well, what kind of evidence could I see? And it seems like Europe is going to be one of the first people to move to a digital currency, maybe Britain. And isn't it interesting that they've had three different financial ministers in like the last 3 months?
Let me
Like
ask you something, George. Let me ask you something
okay,
real quick.
yeah, please.
Is it possible that a digital currency would work better, and it's not that the one that they have right now doesn't work anymore?
That's possible. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So
You
that's what
think
I'm
that's what?
saying. Like
Yeah,
when you watch this stuff, like it didn't take you very long, right? Into your
it took me a
explanation
long
as to
time
why.
to figure stuff out. No,
No, no, no. When
and
you started explaining to me, like
yeah,
when I question, then you started explaining to me why you think what you think. It didn't take very long before you got into your explanation of why, where I could basically the first point you made, ask you a question, could it be this way? And yeah, it could be. There you
I know,
go.
but you never let me finish what I said. Like you interrupted me, and so out of
Okay.
kindness, I stopped what I was doing and let you talk. Right?
Right.
I would also disagree that it would be a better system. All centralized systems are very much hackable. And now you're talking about taking a very analog system that has many controls in place. Over the past 100 years. Well, yeah, about 100 years since they started doing this Fed thing, and you're taking and putting it into a centralized system of where you can now all of a sudden just add zeros at will. And yeah, you were printing money at will too. You can make that argument, but to call this a better system when now you're opening up yourself to greater risk potential, I think is is not it doesn't, yeah, whatever. Can't think of the word.
Yeah, I'm gonna. I had to go and grab some paper because George is gonna go off here, and
Nice, man. Nice.
it is in his explanation. And since we're not gonna like stop and try to understand each point he's gonna make, he's just gonna try to do what's called a Gish Gallop, right?
Oh, nice.
Right. So George is about to do the Gish Gallop, where he's
Okay.
gonna overwhelm the person he's debating by using bits and pieces and fragments of arguments, right,
Mhm.
to try to make his point. So I have to write this down because we're
Fantastic.
in the world of crazy here. Let's go.
Okay. So, in my opinion, the thing that scares me the most is this introduction of a central bank digital currency. You could just abbreviate that as CBDC.
Yeah.
And so there's a good question. And the
Thank
question I think that may be on your mind is, could this be better? Underneath that question, I would like you to write better for whom? Would that question be better? Anytime money comes out, I don't think that the object of money is something that is beneficial to the individual. I see money as a control mechanism. And I see that the current monetary system is no longer an effective way to control the populace. Thus, a new system of government, a new money system must be implemented. I believe that the idea of COVID-19, which I believe COVID is an acronym for Certificate of Vaccination ID 2019. You should probably write that down.
I'm gonna. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Uh,
So,
all
okay. Now, in order to thoroughly have a better monetary system, we must ask the question, what is it that money does? I think I said that I believe money is a control system for people on the bottom, but I also think it's a way to move assets without, it's a medium of exchange to move assets. And with the current monetary system in the European Union, that monetary system is failing. And let me tell you what I mean by failing. Greece is insolvent. Italy is insolvent. The the German bank, Deutsche Bank, is insolvent. And because this monetary system is insolvent, because they cannot get enough money flowing around their country, the volume of money is not working, the speed of money is not working. The only way that Europe does not collapse, and by collapse, I mean people with wheelbarrows of money trying to buy a loaf of bread, the only way there's not hyperinflation is if they change to a central bank currency. That is what is going to happen, in my opinion, by 2030 in the euro. That to me is my evidence for that would be the insolvency of Greece, the insolvency of Italy, the lockdowns that have stifled the complete economy over there, the influx of $15 billion a month from the USA to Ukraine, the Europe's need to be taking the resources from Ukraine. I think that these are all elements that support my theory that the economy of Europe is failing, and the governments there are trying to consolidate as much power and money as possible. How does that sound? Can you read that
No,
back to me?
there's a whole bunch of like poor arguments in there. You know, like
Well, are
it,
they
like
poor arguments or are they incomplete?
they're incomplete.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Incomplete. Yeah, my bad. Incomplete, but yet then like you did exactly what I thought you were gonna do. You know, you were
Okay.
gonna bits and pieces.
Okay, so tell me why my argument's wrong.
Oh well, I have to not go through this because you said a lot, right? So
Okay.
it's there's probably 12 things in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You count Greece and Italy, 6, 7. Like there's like 10 things that you said that kind of formulate your argument.
Okay.
So like I would have to like look at these things and try to make like something out of. I mean, the overarching thing was like your interpretation of the World Economic Forum, right? That's
Um,
on this thing.
I, I think I'm trying to make the case that the CBDC, the central bank digital currency of Europe, the euro is going to fail.
Right, but we started off like you cited the World Economic Forum, right? As like they gave presentations that some of us
Yes.
may not have watched. They put out publications that some of us may or may not read,
Yes.
and
Okay.
that argument that they're telling us right there what it is they are going to do.
Okay. Yes. I
That
agree with
what
that.
part of what they're telling us, or do you have problems with, right? And so you said a whole bunch of things,
Okay.
but now I got to kind of like, it's kind of like I said, I even came out and told you before you started you were going to gish gallop, and you did exactly that. So
Right. But I think
Oh,
I think I tried to make the argument. Do you disagree with my argument? Did I not convince you that the CBDC is a problem in Europe and then it was brought to us? Like I had heard it from the World Economic Forum. And then my argument, I tried to make a case that what I heard was accurate and here's how it's going to happen. I don't see how that's gish gash.
well, no, Gish Gallop is like you bring Italy into it, you know.
But why did I bring Italy into it?
Well, you
Italy is a supporting argument.
bring COVID into it, right?
Yes. But that stopped economic commerce.
You know, I mean, first of all, like if you think that all of these things, like to you, this is not coincidental. These events that are taking place in Europe, especially between like Greece and Italy, and the Deutsche Bank, right?
Yeah.
That these are all somehow related to the CBDC.
They're all part of the same monetary system.
Right, right. And that well, you're making an argument for, you know, like well, like against the CBDC, right? And that they are the cause of all of this stuff.
No, I'm saying that that's the biggest problem that I see, and that's what's going to happen. Like there is going to be a CBDC there.
That
And they're going to get rid of the euro and move to a CBDC, right. And that's the biggest problem that I have from the World Economic Forum.
It's not because like it's something better. It's because you're trying to prove that it's because the old system has broken down and no longer functions, right?
Yes.
So I don't think you made that argument.
What do you think I went wrong at?
Well, like I said, you know, these are all things like I would have to like kind of go through bit by bit here, but because you are stating, okay, so this is you got a little bit of a straw man going on here, right? Like you're saying because, you know, Italy and Deutsche Bank and Greece are insolvent, that means that the current form of like currency that they're using in Europe no longer works. But I can
That's
come
not
back
yeah.
and say,
Okay.
but I can come back and say, well, look, England, France, Germany, Norway, you know, like
England and Norway are not in the euro.
no, yeah, England and Norway are not. But so like I could say Germany, France,
No, Germany. I already talked about the German bank. Like, so they're
well, Deutsche Bank's one bank in Germany, right?
It's the biggest bank in Europe.
Yeah.
Well, not Europe, but in the euro.
Right. So
if they're insolvent, it's probably a pretty good fact that the entirety of the euro is insolvent.
No, because they don't hold the majority of funds in Europe. They may be the biggest bank, but there are many other banks in Europe.
They do hold the biggest funds.
Of all the other banks combined.
In the euro.
In all the other banks combined.
I don't know about all the other banks combined, but as a single standing bank, they do.
Okay. Yeah, I know Deutsche Bank is big, but I didn't think that they held as much euro as all the other banks combined.
Yeah, that's because Germany is really like the only, like everybody pays Germany. Germany is the only thing that produces stuff. Everybody else just takes.
Okay, but still, like, so I guess that means that Deutsche Bank holds more than all the other banks combined, right?
I can't confirm
because Germany produces stuff.
I'm saying that Germany. I'm just saying that bank is the biggest standalone bank, and that Germany is the strongest economy in the euro. So I'm making those parallels there, and the fact that their biggest bank and the strongest economy in the euro is failing, I think that is a significant relevance that the rest of Europe is failing. If the heart of the body is failing, there's a good chance it's going to die.
So here's the thing, man. I don't even think you can make an argument that Germany is failing.
I think I just did.
I don't think you did at all.
Well, why not?
I mean, I didn't hear anything like you gotta convince me that Germany is failing.
Well, I gave you some good points
right there because Greece and Italy is failing or insolvent, and that it's possible that Deutsche Bank could be insolvent, right? That means Germany is failing.
Yes, because let me tell you why. Because Greece and Italy are being forced by Germany to pay absorbent taxes to Germany. and they no longer have the money to do that. And so Germany is just kind of saying like, okay, well, we're going to take all your assets. We're going to take this port. We're going to take this bridge. You guys owe it to us. You guys are going through austerity. And if you look at this girl Maloney that just got not hired, but she got whether elected or selected in Italy, you can see that they're uprising there. They may not come to the table at this next agreement for the euro. Varoufakis, who was the finance minister of Greece, he tells a story about going to Germany and telling the finance ministers, we're not going to pay you back. And the finance minister's like, well, then you cannot be in the government. You're going to pay us back everything plus more. And he's like, we don't have any money to do that. And he's like, well, that's too bad. You're going to pay it back. So when you look at it from that angle, like there's no money, like Germany needs money that they can't get. And I can tell you as someone who's been in debt before, when you're going to people and telling them they're going to pay you and they're not going to pay you, you're going to fail. And that's exactly what's happening over there. How about that? Does that convince you?
No, it doesn't convince me. No, I mean,
Well,
like there's a lot more at play than just like some conversations with some people and in between Italy, Greece, and Germany, man. Like, if only it was that simple, right, George?
it's not that simple. I've only been scratching the surface. There's a lot of moving parts.
That's why I was like, at the beginning of this thing, it's like, so we're armchair economists here.
Yeah, I'm not an economist, man. I'm just giving you my ideas of what I think is going to happen.
But like, I mean, you're not an economist, and which
not at all.
Back to like what everybody was saying about the state of California is going to fall into the ocean. It's going to go broke. All these things are going to happen. They've been saying since the 70s. I spent 20 years there and I listened to this stuff. And yet
that's a straw man right there. Like you're using California in place of Germany. Like those are two different. That's two different models, right? That's apples and oranges.
Well, no, I'm not making an argument the other way. I'm just saying.
You're saying that Germany is just like California. The same thing it said about California. It didn't happen, therefore it won't happen in Germany.
No, I didn't say that. No, I didn't say
you
that.
Did. You said it's just like California.
No, what I'm saying is I've heard these same stories.
Right.
And my point
You've heard similar stories, not the same stories.
Stories, right? And so my point is like it goes back to armchair economics, right?
I don't know. I'm not an economist, dude. I'm just talking out of what I think is happening.
So here's my argument. I think you're picking and choosing, right, bits and pieces of information to formulate your argument. That
yes,
I don't really think they correlate much. Maybe you do, but
right.
But I'm saying this is the same type of argument that I heard in California in the 70s when I was a kid. Like all this stuff's going to happen with California. It's going to collapse. And it's been almost 50 years. And there it is. It's still there. Because you know why? Because when I listened to my grandfather and, my friends' parents talk about this stuff about California is going to collapse, it was the same thing. It was bits and pieces of arguments that had no correlation to each other, but they thought it did. And that was their evidence that this was going to happen. It sounds like you with this.
So, just a couple points of reference here. California is part of the United States, so comparing California to like a European Union is kind of like an apple and orange comparison. But for a more interesting comparison, the European Union's market capitalization as a percentage of their GDP has fallen 20% from 2017 to 2018. And these are the latest stats, is just 2018, so we can't even get into now. And that's the same as it was basically back in it looks like 2014, according to this graph. So since 2014 to 2018, they lost, looks like about 35% of the value total against their market capitalization per percentage of GDP. These are types of numbers, like if you look at the United States numbers, these are the numbers that kind of, they always kind of rise type idea. And this kind of goes back to why would it rise, why would it fall? And this goes back to the petrodollar and the sustainability of the United States currency through that system, that mechanism of trade. So, when, if we're going to play armchair economists, which I could play a little bit more than armchair if I really wanted to pull up the right statistics. But we're, you know, these Keynesian economics, this debt-based system that is everybody in the West, pretty much the entire world, has always been, you know, depending on your school of thought when it comes to economics, has always been, you know, we're going to continue to kick the can down the road. We're going to deal with it later. We're just going to continue to leverage ourselves, leverage ourselves, leverage ourselves. Similar exactly to what happened to FTX. They just continue to leverage themselves with greater liabilities until the whole thing falls apart because they actually can't pay back all of the debt that they have accrued. And the leverage all of a sudden disappears because of market shifts, changing from OPEC to a BRICS system, something like that.
Yeah, like I'll make like fuck, I'm not an economist, dude. I don't know, but this is what I read, and like I'm just trying to make the case that like I'm not just spewing bullshit. Like this is coming from sources like, uh, the Financial Times, like Reuters, like there's a lot of international reports that you could read for free. They're saying the things. Something. I'm not just making it up. Like I've listened to hours of the finance minister from Greece talking about the talks that he had when he went in there and when he was kicked out of the government in Greece, and this new party that he started where he has like these amazing ideas where, you know, let me share an idea with a positive idea that this guy came up with when he talks about the world after the collapse or what we can do to change business. This guy's idea is that in the United States, like the corporate structure is all wrong. Wouldn't it be a better corporate structure if the employee goes into, like, you get hired at UPS and then you as the employee, you get one share of that company and everybody that works there gets one share of that corporation. When there's time to vote, everybody gets a vote. That's going to make that corporation function as a
Meritocracy.
a meritocracy. It's going to have integrity and everyone's going to be represented. There's going to be real equality there because the guy that drives the truck and the guy that crunches the numbers, they all get one vote. When you quit that company, you give back your share and then you go to another company and you get a new share. It does away with all the speculators. And like that's a big part of why all our government's failing are these speculators. But like this came from this guy being in the heart of the beast in the Euro finance ministers meetings and being like, this is crazy. It's going down. And he's written multiple books that talk about what happened there. They're fascinating. And even more fascinating are the ideas that have come from his trials and tribulations being in there. So I think that even though it's going to be rocky and it's going to be horrible, I think that there's light at the end of the tunnel. Like I think some good things can come out of this. But in my opinion, there's no turning back from this devastation that's coming. And I'm not trying to be gloom and doom, but a house divided cannot stand. And when there's too many weight on top, it collapses in on itself. And we're seeing that now with FTX, with Voyager, with all the zombie corporations. Like it's getting to a point where there's no more room to kick the can. And maybe it could happen. Who knows? I didn't think they could do it.
You'd be surprised. Yeah, you'd be surprised how well the can be kicked.
Thing is like you point out what what this guy from Greece said about companies, employees owning one share and then they have a vote. Well, the country that you say is in collapse, they do that. I mean, not exactly that same thing, but they have something similar. Whereas every board of every corporation has to have workers on the board. If they got 12 board members, 2 of them got to be from the factory, the people who are actually doing the work, and yet there's still issues. According
they have a much better system in Europe as far for the worker than they do in the United States, but that doesn't change their economic outlook for the next 20 years.
It also doesn't change the way that the company is going to operate. Just because you have 2 board seats doesn't give you shit all if there's 12 board seats. Because it's always majority vote in those board situations. And, it becomes one of those things. If you only got 2 out of 12, well, unless you have an uphill battle to convince every single one of the other voters to vote your way, as opposed to, the status quo and, bonuses for executives and board members that we're going to vote on now versus, distributing that money as dividends to each one of our employees. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say I have some time on boards, and it is fucking cutthroat. in this
Right.
country.
Well, it does work, right? Because it was those board members on the board of Volkswagen that blew the whistle on their emissions bullshit that they were pulling, right?
Yeah,
And there are many instances throughout Germany where it's been workers who have actually, you know, pushed the policy one way or the other
right.
when it came to a split in the board.
Sure. And once upon a
So
time
that
we
means
had
both.
this. Yeah, once upon a time we had this too with the unions, right? And then unions got completely gutted in this country, over the past, 30, 40 years.
Well, they've been in some parts they've been replaced, which is what everybody's complaining about California is, right? California stepped in and said, we're just going to do what the unions do. We're going to provide protections for employees, um, and we think that we can do it better for cheaper.
Yeah, and it doesn't really work out that well because they don't have skin in the game, so to
Largest
speak.
economy in the world.
You could say that, but that's those are numbers on paper. And you could say it's the largest economy in the world, but it's also sitting below a $36 trillion deficit. So what good is it actually doing? And then you can correlate that with, okay, so how did it actually benefit the workers at the end of the day? Was it a rising tide that raised all ships, or are people, not able to afford the rent in San Francisco? Are people not able to even have the thought of buying a house? I don't. When the problem I think with all of this kind of discussion is that none of this exists in a vacuum, and it's all interconnected. And unless we're willing to, reasonably examine all of the different individual pieces of this that are interconnected in these systems without trying to draw conclusions before we do so, then we're never going to get anywhere. We're just going to beat our heads against the wall.
Exactly, right? Which was I'm not saying that what George is saying doesn't hold any sort of water. There's no truth there. I just don't see the doomsday scenario that he paints.
Well, like I said, I hope the hell you're right and we're wrong. I really do. It's one of those things. It would probably behoove us to actually put together a little research and put together some actual real talking points instead of just blowing out our ass here, which I'm happy to do so. But and that would probably be a very valuable conversation for not just us but other people as well. So maybe we should try to do that as opposed to trying to solve all the world's, where it's going to go and what sort of apocalypse is going to befall us in a 2-hour psychedelic roundtable, which we haven't even talked about psychedelics, damn it. Just saying.
Man, it makes me want to take some psychedelics.
Do that if George would agree not to gish gallop.
But that's...
I think I already gave Paul some good notes that we can work from.
No, I mean, it was good. It was good, and it was like I just realized, hey, this isn't going to be a point-by-point discussion here. This is going to be George coming at me hard with all these things. It's like I needed to write them, and I think thanks, George, for actually telling me, you may want to write this down. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciated that.
Yeah, and look, I'm not an economist, man, but I believe this is what I believe, and you could believe in one hand and crap in the other and see which one fills up first. But this is what I see, and with my limited sight and with the information that I take in, we all take in information from different sources, and this is my world. This is what I see, and maybe it's some of the people I talk to, and maybe it is my proclivity to see the negative so that I can react in a positive way. Or I once heard a pessimist is an optimist who's been around the block, and maybe that's kind of this thing that I use because I know if I'm thinking about it being negative when it's positive, my life's going to be better. So maybe it's part of my philosophy. But these are all sources that I'll go and I'll try to look them up too because I know I can find them all. I have the books here and stuff, and at least then I can give you accurate information and cite the source I'm saying from instead of just reaching back here and pulling it out.
Well, too, it's like we in the first couple conversations that we had during our roundtable discussion, we talked about communication, messaging. These are all topics that we've touched on quite a bit. And so, to me, it's there's just a little bit of irresponsibility when someone's gonna go out there. I'm not gonna mention any names. One of the three of us here, and then just really like go off on some sort of esoteric rant, or basically um Kev's texting us. Sorry, man, I got distracted. Um, but then basically, like paint a pretty gloom picture, man. Like it's what it's part of the problem. What's happening? Like I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking, man, this is not much different than like listening to Alex Jones, or one of those guys that's just out there to scare people. And I think for me, like lowering the temperature of America and kind of trying to avoid those types of rants, to me is like it's important, man.
But I think that, like, I believe what I'm saying is true. I'm not trying to
No, I
lower
know.
the temperature, but
And
I don't. Why would that be irresponsible though?
well, because like we just said, like like we should probably be coming with more facts instead of we're kind of just winging it here, right? And then so somebody may listen to you, George, and take you seriously. I'm not one of them, but maybe somebody would.
Well, it's
And
just
then
my opinion. Like, I mean, I think you're. I think
no,
that you
no,
can
I
cite
know,
your
but I'm just
opinion, right?
joking.
I know you are.
But 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 at the same time, it's like this is the reason why we have like Infowars blows up, because the guy goes out there and just scares people, and he too, I think, believes in what he's feeding the people that listen to him.
What I'm
And
hearing is you're very convincing, George.
no, no.
Boom.
Yeah, very convincing, George. No,
Thank you.
I mean, but I mean, which goes back to the sixth grade education thing, right?
I
Like, there's a lot of people
I
out
can
there
see that. Okay, okay.
I agree. There has to be some sense of responsibility when we're engaging in some sort of a public forum, right?
I have too much fun.
I know you're having fun, and I tried to rein it back with some facts and figures here. And I tried to tie the pieces together, because for me there is a preponderance of evidence to all of this stuff, and I've been researching it for a long time as well. But when we do jump from one thing to another to another to another without establishing the correlation, without establishing the facts, without establishing the chain of custody of all of these things, it does potentially do a disservice, and I think that's what Paul's getting to.
Yeah.
I love it, Paul. Like, for me to be able, like, I want to give you a huge thank you, because like I know that, like, if you ever think something, you're gonna call me out on my bullshit, and like, but I hope you understand like how thrilling and fun it is for me to try to think on the fly of all these things that I've heard that might be true. That, like, I'm like, yep, this, and let me follow it up with that. Oh, you think that? Then this. And for me, it's so exhilarating and so fun, and so like I feel like my whole brain is working when I can speak clearly and quickly and concisely. Like, that to me, and I know that that is dangerous. Like, I really enjoy it. And I feel when I can string it together, like I hit a home run. So I should probably work on that, because that's not something that I should be proud of. I should probably work on that. I should probably try to have the best evidence if I'm going to string those things together. So thank you for pushing back on that. As much as I enjoy it, I need it. So thank you. I feel like I'm better because of it.
It was entertaining, and you were like super passionate about it, man. It was fun to watch.
Thank you, dude.
Like I was like, wow, George. Like I'm trying to write notes here and watch you at the same time. I'm like, I can take my eyes off George. I'm gonna miss something.
I was trying to purposely talk so you couldn't write notes. I'm like, you can't talk, you can't think this fast. And then I was trying to say things like, why don't you write that acronym down? Okay, boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, what the hell is with that acronym? Where did that come from?
I mean, that right there.
Certificate of Vaccination ID 2019, baby.
I know that to me, I was like, man, here, right there. Like this is my point. That's just part of my point. Like, oh, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, good on you, George.
Thank you. Thanks.
You went real fast. No, thank you. Thank you, George. And yeah, you went real fast, and you had a lot to say, and you threw a lot of stuff. It was definitely overwhelming. It was one of the best Gish gallops I've heard in a long time, man. It really was.
Only
Awesome.
It wasn't. Only it wasn't.
No, it was great. It was great. Like, it's like I'm just gonna bombard you with information, bits and pieces here of different things, and you can figure out if they actually all connect together. It's not my responsibility. I'm just here to try to overwhelm you.
Well, I think it was more than overwhelming, though, right? Like at the end of it, I think I tied those things together. But we'll come back with the notes. We'll come back with them, and then we'll see how many of those things actually thoroughly apply. Because I'm willing to wager a stick of bubble gum that everything I
Big
said in
bet.
there is very is it ties together. Like I said, I can't cite you the sources right now, but I'm very confident in what I said is accurate as far as all those things and the CBDC and Europe going to fail by 2030. That currency is going to fail, and the WEF has come out and talked about the CBDC, and that is what scares me. And I think all those things are tied together. It's like
Okay,
I stand by my evidence.
okay. Well, I you're gonna struggle with the
Okay,
certificate of vaccination ID 2019.
Yeah,
So
you might be surprised. You might be surprised.
I'm gonna see.
You know,
I'm
that,
gonna need some official government documents for that one,
Okay,
buddy.
that might be my weakest part of the argument.
But
But how
yeah.
about like if we just throw out that one, because you can't get them all right. I bet you the other 90% would be really good. That's still an A plus.
I love
Okay.
it. Oh
Okay.
shit.
Yeah, man, yeah. Grade yourself. You know,
Okay.
that's good. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm for sure, George. I believe in you 100%. I can't wait.
Thank you.
All right, to hear the next one, man. I know you're going to be cruising around in your UPS trucks trying to get Christmas presents to people. You know, and you're going to be going a mile a minute in your brain, right? And I feel sorry for that girl that works now. George is going to be like, it's all on you. Okay.
I gotta write some notes. Hold on.
I got some notes. Listen, I can't help you until I figure out certificate of vaccination ID. Okay? When I get that, then I'll be back in the truck with you. We'll
That's
go.
right.
I'll throw packages on people's front
Just
doors.
don't write another letter to your congressperson asking for evidence for that.
Yeah.
You don't need a third audit.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. And maybe between now and then, you could go tell your boss to fuck off. All right.
In a nice way. In a nice way.
In a nice
Right.
way. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this will be good. I wonder how many people are getting wrong packages, man, during this.
Probably not many. I'm pretty good at that. I think I can
Compartmentalize.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you're good. I know. I just picture you with your AirPods in, you probably got some voice notes app on your phone. You're gonna be
Oh, I got Paul on this one.
But for real. So yeah, like in the chat, we should kind of write some stuff out as to what it is we're gonna discuss.
Yeah, well,
I can put up slides.
again, I think again, this is going to be a long one too, because in order to really cite all of this stuff properly, you do have to go down the rabbit holes, make the connections, cite the evidence, pull things from very disparate places and put together this into a big long argument, because it's not a simple thing. Economics alone isn't a simple thing. And then when you start to tie all of the political aspects to it, all of the societal aspects to it, all of these other things, now it becomes a quagmire of fuckery.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm expecting. I can't wait. Looking forward to it. George, you took the bait. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And I owed you one after that fucking clip you put on the thing.
Hey, I heard that. I watched that show. Like, holy shit, gentlemen. That went to some interesting places.
Yeah, well, you know what? I mean, look, let's keep in mind here, and this is something that I've known. I've been playing along with George for a little bit. Is this guy, and I don't know if he's doing it to all the rest of you guys, because I don't know what your guys' individual, conversations are all about. But this dude's trying to set me up, I know that, man, and I've called it out before, and I'll continue to call it out. But I'm cool with it, Like George, like I guess I'll provide some sort of entertainment value for George. I'm fine with that.
You're the
He set me up.
instigator.
He set me up a couple times too. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think he does it in good faith. At least that's what
No,
that's
yeah,
what
no,
I'm
for
holding
sure.
out with. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. It's in fun. It's all like I said, I pointed it out here before.
Dude, I'm a little sinister, and like it's probably a character flaw. Like I don't.
It's
I
probably.
find it.
I'm a
I
little
find it
sinister. It's
funny, man.
probably a character flaw. Hmm.
Probably.
Oh shit.
I, dude, if I'm being too much of a dick, dude, just tell me shit. I don't mean to
Oh man,
be,
Yeah.
but like
Yeah.
okay,
No,
okay,
no, not
okay.
at
'Cause
all. No, no.
I do it.
I-
I do it, and like I think it's funny.
This is just the
But, like,
counter.
I sometimes like I've hurt people's feelings before.
No,
and I'm like,
this
"God damn,
is
that
the
was too much."
counter fuckery going on here. You have to.
Okay,
You're
okay.
dishing it out. You got to take some too, buddy.
Dude, I love it all. I love it all, but I don't. Sometimes I worry. Like I'm like, dude, am I being too much of a dick? Because like I've done that before. Like I've been too much of a dick to people and hurt relationships. So I want to be mindful that like I'm not doing that. Like I love you guys, and I know like I feel like I could push you as hard as you want, and you would push me right back. So like if that's ever the case, please tell me up front. Like maybe sometimes my sense of humor is weird, but like I don't want it to ever injure a relationship with people.
Oh
I
hell
fucking
no.
care.
No, wait.
Well, George, if you're asking yourself that question, usually the answer is yes.
I probably got to work on it.
But I don't care, man. Like, you're not gonna hurt my feelings.
Yeah, me
I
either.
know. That's why it's awesome.
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
But
And vice versa. Like
so maybe
vice versa.
at some point we got to get back to talking about psychedelics, man. So
It's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
we could do like psychedelic economics. I don't
Ooh,
know,
there we go.
like-
Let's all drop a whole bunch of
yeah.
mushrooms and go economic style.
well, we need to do that. Maybe after the new year, man. I can't do that right now, but after the new year, I should be in a good place to
Yeah.
like explore with that, having that conversation or a conversation with one or all of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm balls to the wall till January too, so after the new year maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not a good time for me. So, but yeah, cool.
Well, this was a lot of fun, gentlemen. I had a freaking blast. Last couple of days I've had a blast, man, and I look forward to it, and I'm so proud of where this is going, and people are watching, and like it's growing at a level that I never thought possible. So I'm really excited, man. I see it changing. I see my life changing, and I know that may be some grandiose ideas, but I see it happening. Like I'm booked solid. I made a bid for January. I got someone that's already coming in. I'm booked till January.
That's
Like,
awesome.
it's mind blowing, mind blowing.
Yeah, good for you, man.
Well, I can't do it without you guys. Like I feel like every one of these conversations gives me fuel to be more excited, to be better, and to call out more stuff. And every conversation like this, I feel I get to learn more about myself, especially critical conversations like this, where there is pushback. I feel like I get to learn how I'm communicating and what's effective, what's not effective, what's fun, what's over the line. But it's all new. So it's really incredibly powerful to have people that you can just lay everything out there and then get the feedback from. I feel I've become a better communicator since I've been doing this, and especially since we've had this format at the roundtable.
For sure. Practice, 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 right?
Yeah, I think it's everybody. I think all of you guys are
Yep.
becoming better communicators, right? And I think together as I think we like just this conversation alone is I don't have a whole lot of people that like friends that I sit down with for 2 hours a week or 4 hours a week, and like have conversations like this. And you can't have these kind of conversations and not get closer to somebody, not understand who they are and how they think and what they're about, and understand them and argue with them and laugh with them. And it's really rewarding. So thank you. Yeah. All right. We got to get out of here. All right, guys. Great show. That's all we got for today. Aloha.